I knew something was wrong the second she asked if I'd mind driving separately. It wasn't a question. It was a quiet declaration. One of those subtle, polite slaps that don't sting until later. Fallon and I were headed to her company's launch party, some overhyped event in a renovated factory with chandeliers hanging where machines used to scream. She said parking might be tight. She said she'd be busy networking. She said it like I was an optional extra. So I said sure. I got there 20 minutes after her. Not on purpose. I just sat in the car for a while with the engine off, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the windshield. I looked like a guy who was about to watch his marriage rot under disco lights. Inside was worse than I expected. Fake laughter, too many rings on fingers that had no calluses, and waiters who judged your shoes before offering a drink. I stood by the bar and ordered water. I don't drink anymore. Not since Fallon said she didn't like who I became after 3 glasses. She was near the stage. Not alone. He wore charcoal gray. No tie. Hair like he used mousse, but wanted you to think he didn't. Fallon had her hand on his chest like she owned shares in his heartbeat. They were laughing, but not like colleagues laugh. This was different. This was intimate. Familiar. Like a song they both knew and had danced to before I even existed. And then she did dance with him. Right there, in the middle of the room. No music playing, just the slow, instrumental hum of a jazz quartet. But she swayed. He spun her. She leaned in, closed her eyes, like I was dead. And the worst part? She knew I was watching. She looked straight at me. Once, as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't stop, didn't wave me over, didn't flinch. I turned, walked past the bathrooms, through the hallway with all the flickering Edison bulbs, out into the night. I drove straight to a diner that stays open until 3 a.m. Sat at the corner booth. Ordered pancakes. Didn't eat them. No texts. No calls. I went home and left the porch light off. She came back just before sunrise. I didn't say a word. Just watched her walk past me with smudged mascara and a perfume trail that didn't belong to me anymore. At 7:12 a.m., I heard her sobbing in the bathroom, and I should have gone to her. But I didn't. Because what she was crying about wasn't me. Not really. And the next 48 hours? They cracked our whole life open. She stayed in that bathroom for almost an hour. I could hear the faucet running the whole time, like she thought the sound would hide the crying. It didn't. She forgot I'm the one who notices everything. Like how she never cries with her makeup on unless she's completely shattered. Fallon hated vulnerability. She used to say emotions were messy and inefficient. So to hear her sob like that, alone behind the door, meant something had broken. But I didn't go to her. I couldn't. Not after what I saw. Not after that dance. Not after the look. That dead stare she gave me before she turned back to him. Like I wasn't even a guest in her life anymore. I sat in the kitchen drinking cold coffee and trying to make sense of it. Was it just dancing? Was it more? Had it been going on behind my back, quietly for weeks? Months? How long had I been the man she drove separately from? When she finally came out, she was wearing a hoodie I didn't recognize. Not one of mine. Not one I'd seen before. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just walked past me and mumbled something like, "I didn't expect you to leave." That's it. Not why did you leave, but I didn't expect it. Like she had already written the script for that night, and I'd gone off script. Like I was supposed to stay and swallow it. I said nothing. What was there to say? That I saw her fall into another man's rhythm while my world crumbled by the bar? Fallon went to bed. She curled up facing the wall, like we were strangers sharing a hotel room. I watched her back rise and fall as she breathed like she hadn't just destroyed the last piece of me I was protecting. It's strange how betrayal doesn't feel like a stab. It feels like slow acid. Around noon, I finally asked, who was he? She didn't flinch. Didn't pretend she didn't know who I meant. She just said his name, Silas, like it was a password to a locked room in her past I never had the key to. I used to know him, she said flatly. From before you. That line hit like a punch I didn't see coming. Before me? I never knew there was a before me she still missed. Then she added, it was just dancing. That's all. You're blowing it up in your head. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I realized that was the moment I stopped being her husband and became her inconvenience. But here's where it gets strange. That night, Fallon left her phone in the kitchen. She never does that. Fallon is the kind of person who triple checks her phone is charging. But she was exhausted or careless or maybe deep down, she wanted to be caught. Around 1 a.m., I saw the screen light up. One name. Silas. And the message? I can still feel your hand in mine. Can't sleep. I stared at it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't unlock the phone. I didn't need to. I just sat there. Because in that moment, I knew I wasn't fighting to save a marriage. I was standing in the ruins, trying to convince myself the house was still standing. But the next day, that's when the real twist happened. And it wasn't Silas that broke her. It was someone else entirely. The next morning, Fallon was already gone when I woke up. She didn't leave a note, didn't send a text. Just vanished into the city like she was never here. That used to bother me. The way she moved through the world like she didn't need anyone. But now it felt more deliberate. Like she wanted to disappear from me in pieces. Not all at once. Just enough to get used to life without my face in it. I sat alone in the kitchen, the silence thick enough to taste. The hoodie she'd worn the night before, the one I didn't recognize, was crumpled on the chair across from me. It still smelled like her perfume, but underneath it, something faint lingered. A scent I couldn't place. Not cologne exactly. Something woodsy. Subtle. His scent? I shouldn't have touched her phone again. I know that. But curiosity becomes poison when you've already been wounded. It doesn't just want answers. It wants to burn down the questions. So when I saw her phone lit up on the table, unlocked and resting like an open invitation, I gave in. I didn't go into her messages. I went to the voice notes. It was a section I'd never even noticed before. That's when I saw one, time-stamped at 3:17 a.m., hours after the party, when she was already home, already pretending nothing happened. I hovered over it for a long time. Then I pressed play. At first, nothing but silence. Then footsteps. Her voice came in, hushed, shaky, like she didn't want to be heard. "I shouldn't have come home," she whispered. A pause. I keep thinking about the look on his face. He didn't even fight. Another pause. Then, and that scares me more than if he'd yelled. Then she said his name. Not Silas. Noah. I froze. Noah? Who the hell was Noah? I'd never heard that name before. Not in her circle. Not at her work. Not in any of her stories. Not even in the background of her life. The message ended without explanation. I just sat there, stunned. Not because she'd sent a voice message, but because she hadn't sent it to Silas. I checked. It was unsent, sitting in her drafts. She'd recorded it, but never sent it. Which meant it wasn't meant to be found. It wasn't performative. It wasn't damage control. It was something else. Something closer to confession. A truth meant for no one but the void. I put the phone down and stared at the wall. There was another man. Another name. Another piece of her I didn't even know existed. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife, I got a call. Unknown number. I picked up. A woman's voice. "Is this Curtis?" she asked. She sounded nervous, like she'd rehearsed this call 100 times, but still wanted to hang up. "Yes," I said slowly. "Who's this?" There was a pause. Then, softly, "I don't think you know me, but I think we need to talk about Fallon." The line went quiet. My skin went cold. Because the way she said Fallon's name, it wasn't judgmental. It wasn't bitter. It was afraid. And that's when I realized Fallon hadn't just danced with a man at a party. She was dancing with fire. And I was the fool trying to hold the matchbook. The silence between us on that call was louder than the words that followed. I waited. I didn't know whether to speak or hang up. I just held the phone to my ear like it might catch fire if I moved wrong. The woman, whoever she was, finally spoke again, but slower this time, like she was second-guessing everything. "My name is Brenna," she said. "I used to. I was close with Noah. A while ago. Before he moved." That name again. Noah. I clenched the edge of the table and asked the only thing I could manage. Who the hell is Noah? And what does he have to do with my wife? Brenna exhaled, a deep, tired kind of breath. I could almost picture her on the other end, sitting in a car parked on a quiet street, tapping her fingers against the steering wheel while trying to convince herself that doing this was a good idea. "I don't know what you've been told," she said. "But Fallon, she and Noah were more than just friends. I thought you knew. I thought." She stopped herself. "They used to see each other. Not recently, I think, but it never really ended. People like them, they don't say goodbye. They just press pause until the timing feels safe again." My throat went dry. When there was another pause. Then she said it, the answer I didn't know I'd been fearing. "Last year. Summer. Around June." My hand was shaking now. June. That was when Fallon started leaving on weekend retreats for brand partnerships and client-facing workshops. That was when she bought the expensive luggage without asking. That was when she started wearing that green silk blouse I'd never seen before, saying it made her feel more decisive. I don't remember much of the rest of the call. My mind was racing so fast it blurred everything else. I do remember Brenna saying, "I only found out she was married after. I thought maybe you should know, because, well, he's back." That stuck with me. He's back. Like a storm rolling in, like a ghost walking back into the house it once haunted. After the call ended, I just sat there, staring at the phone, at the hoodie, at the empty coffee mug she'd left by the sink. My life didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like something I was borrowing, something I hadn't earned. That night, I waited for Fallon to come home. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't ask about Noah. I didn't bring up Brenna or the voice message or the way she danced like I was a stranger. Instead, I watched her. Every gesture, every word. She was quieter than usual. No fake smiles. No overcorrection. She was distracted, distant in a way that told me she was holding something back, not out of guilt, but out of preparation. Like she was rehearsing a conversation I hadn't been invited to yet. And then, after dinner, she said something that knocked the air out of my lungs. "I might need to go away for a few days," she muttered, scrolling on her phone, not looking at me. "Hotel needs coverage at another property. Just temporary." I didn't respond right away. I just kept watching her fingers tap mindlessly at her screen like she didn't just drop a grenade in the middle of the room. "Where?" I finally asked. She paused, just for a second, but long enough. "Crescent Bay," she said. "Coastal property. I'll only be gone 3 nights. Crescent Bay. That wasn't just any hotel. That was the one she and I stayed at when we first talked about getting married. The place where she once told me she couldn't imagine her life without me. And now she was going back, without me. Without a ring on her finger. She hadn't worn it in weeks. That night, I made a decision. If she was going to Crescent Bay, so was I. But not to stop her. To watch what she became when she thought I wasn't looking. I checked into Crescent Bay under a different name, Cole Matthews. I don't know why I picked that. Maybe it sounded like someone who wouldn't hesitate. Someone who didn't ask for permission to find the truth. The hotel still looked the same. That soft beige exterior, those swaying palm trees out front, the same faint smell of ocean air and lemon cleaner in the lobby. But nothing felt familiar. Not really. When Fallon and I came here years ago, we were still clinging to the fantasy that love was enough. That being good to someone meant they'd never leave. That if you held them close, they'd stop searching for what they thought they were missing. Now, I was just a man hiding in plain sight, watching his wife slip out of the skin he thought he knew. I saw her check in an hour after me. She wore sunglasses indoors and kept her head low as she approached the desk, like she didn't want to be seen. She was alone. No suitcase. Just a shoulder bag and her phone in hand. She didn't flirt with the concierge. Didn't smile. She looked like someone showing up to a funeral she wasn't invited to. I waited 15 minutes, then followed. Room 409. She hadn't changed her pattern. Still preferred the higher floors, the ocean view, the silence from above. I didn't knock. Of course not. I didn't even get close. I just lingered in the hallway for a moment and listened. Nothing. No voices. No laughter. No sound of her calling someone the way she used to call me when we were apart. Just to say she missed the way my voice softened at night. Later that evening, I saw her at the bar downstairs. She was sitting by the window, facing the beach, sipping white wine and fiddling with the stem of the glass. She wasn't waiting for someone. She was preparing for someone. There's a difference. I ordered a drink and kept my distance. My heartbeat was crawling up into my throat. Every second that passed felt like it was dragging me closer to something I didn't want to witness, but couldn't stop chasing. And then he arrived. Noah. I didn't need to guess. The way she stood up before he even reached the table told me everything. The way her body tilted forward, hesitant but electric, confirmed the name. They hugged. Not like lovers, but not like old friends either. It was brief. Careful. Loaded. She whispered something in his ear, and he didn't smile. He looked nervous. On edge. They sat. Talked. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw enough. Fallon did most of the talking. Noah nodded, rubbed the back of his neck, looked down a lot. She reached for his hand at one point. Just briefly, but it looked like a reflex. Not desire. Almost regret. They didn't touch again after that. No kiss. No flirty leaning in. No laughter. Just long silences and slow sips of wine. And then, after barely 30 minutes, He stood. She stood. They exchanged a few last words. He put his hand on her shoulder, gently, like it was the last time he ever would, and walked out. Alone. I sat there, stunned, my head spinning. That was it. That was Noah. That was the man who haunted my phone screen, who sent texts at 3 a.m., who made my wife cry behind a bathroom door. It didn't make sense. Nothing did. But then, Fallon got up. She didn't go to her room. She walked through the lobby, out the side exit, and across the parking lot. And that's when I followed. Not quickly, not aggressively, just enough to keep her in sight. She wasn't heading for the beach. She was heading for the far corner of the property, to a small conference room building set aside for private events. I remember it because we once joked it looked like a dentist's office pretending to be a spa. She pulled out a key card from her bag and entered through a side door. What the hell was she doing? I waited 10 minutes, then walked up to the building. The glass doors were frosted, but just inside the lobby, on a table, sat a laminated itinerary. One sheet, one logo, one word, Mara, and beneath that, a subtitle, Private Retreat, Invitation Only. I'd never heard of it before, but Fallon had, because her name was on the guest list, along with 12 others, and none of them were Noah. He was never the destination. He was the distraction. I stood there in the soft glow of the lobby light, staring at the printed itinerary as if it might rearrange itself into something less unnerving. The word Mara kept repeating in my head like a warning siren. Fallon's name was right there in black ink, third from the top, in bold, like she belonged to it. Like she'd always belonged to it. My wife was attending a private retreat I'd never once heard her mention. No logo I recognized. No public listing online. Nothing that explained what it was or why she would be sneaking away under the guise of hotel business. 12 names. All women. No titles. No affiliations. Just first and last names with room numbers and initials next to each one, like someone was categorizing them. Like they were part of a system I didn't understand. Fallon had marked herself with an S. Others had L, N, X, and a few with no mark at all. None of it made sense. And worse, none of it felt safe. I should have left. That would have been the rational thing to do. Walk away, pretend I never saw it, confront her later when we were home, on neutral ground. But I was already too deep. There's something addictive about catching someone in the middle of a lie. Not just the thrill of the truth, but the unraveling of it. Like picking at a thread in a sweater until the whole thing falls apart in your hands. So I waited. 2 hours. Sat in my car with the engine off, staring at the building through my windshield. I watched the lights in the windows, subtle movement, shadows occasionally shifting, once a laugh that floated out through a crack in the glass. It didn't sound joyful. It sounded practiced, almost theatrical. When Fallon finally emerged, it was nearly midnight. She didn't look startled or secretive. She looked lighter, not happy, empty. Her expression was slack, like someone who'd cried without letting tears fall. She walked slowly, her bag held tight under her arm, eyes focused straight ahead. I ducked as she passed by, watching her get into her car and drive off toward the hotel. I waited 5 more minutes, then walked back toward the building. This time, the front door was unlocked. The lobby was quiet, dimmed. A faint smell of incense and lavender hung in the air, which might have been calming if it weren't so heavy. I moved toward the table again, scanning for any additional paperwork. That's when I noticed it. A small leather binder tucked behind the itinerary. No label. No lock. I opened it. Inside were notes, handwritten, dense, messy, pages upon pages, all in the same looping penmanship. Not Fallon's. There were lists of names, short phrases like detach identity, control narratives, cut emotional anchors, and the one that made my stomach turn. If he resists, document silence. What the hell was this? A cult? A therapy group? A psychological workshop designed to erase something? And then I found a page that stopped my breath cold. A transcript. Word for word. A conversation I had with Fallon last winter. Something I'd said during an argument. Something private. Something that never left our house. I read the sentence 3 times before I accepted it was real. It always feels like you're planning your exit, Fallon. Even when we're happy. I remember saying that. I remember her turning away, pretending not to hear it. But someone wrote it down. Someone documented it. I dropped the binder like it burned me. This wasn't infidelity. This was something else. Fallon wasn't just pulling away from me emotionally. She was being guided. Steered. encouraged to remove me like a bad habit. And then it hit me. Mara wasn't a brand. It was a system, maybe a group, maybe a program, maybe even a kind of removal process. The S next to her name. Subject? Survivor? Something worse? I don't know how I made it back to my room. My legs were trembling. My mouth was dry. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting from trying to make too many connections too fast. When I collapsed onto the bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about everything I didn't know about the woman I married. And how she wasn't just cheating on me. She was dismantling me. On purpose. With help. I didn't sleep. I laid in the hotel bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, hearing every tick of the wall clock like it was counting down to something I couldn't name. I didn't know what Mara was exactly, but I knew it wasn't innocent. You don't find transcripts of your private conversations in binders tucked behind itineraries if everything is above board. You don't get labeled and categorized like some psychological inventory sheet unless someone's pulling strings behind the curtain. By morning, I had a plan. Not a good one, but something. I dressed, skipped breakfast, and headed straight to the conference center while the rest of the hotel was still waking up. The building was quiet again. Deserted, except for the faint sound of a door clicking shut in the hallway to the left. I turned toward it instinctively, and before I could think twice, I was face to face with a woman. She wasn't Fallon. She was younger, maybe late 20s. Pale skin, auburn hair pulled back tightly like she didn't want to risk showing softness. Her eyes flicked over me with practiced calculation, like she'd already assessed my threat level before I'd opened my mouth. "You're not supposed to be here," she said flatly. "I know," I replied, not bothering to lie. "But I need to ask you something." She didn't walk away. She looked over her shoulder, made sure no one else was around, then stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You followed her here?" "Yes." "Fallon." My breath caught in my throat. She knew her name. "She said you wouldn't come. That you were passive." I swallowed hard. "You know my name too?" She didn't answer that. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and asked, "Do you think she's wrong?" That stopped me. It wasn't an insult. It was a test. Like she was trying to confirm something for herself or for someone else. "What is Mara?" I asked, dodging the bait. She looked down, then back up. Her voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "It's not what you think. It's not a cult. It's not a religion. It's a removal program." "Removal of what?" "Dependency," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Emotional codependency. Internal self-erasure. Women like Fallon come here when they've been overwritten for too long." That word, overwritten, hit me harder than I expected. She kept talking. "They spend years trying to be what someone else needs. Calm, small, predictable, generous. They shape themselves around another person's expectations until they forget what shape they were to begin with. Mara helps them unlearn that. We document the process. We observe triggers. We monitor whether they're capable of releasing guilt." "And the men?" I asked, voice sharp now. "Do we just get thrown away? Do we get a label? A letter next to our name?" She didn't flinch. "You're not the subject," she said calmly. "You're the shadow. The old structure. The weight." I wanted to scream. Instead, I stepped back, hands trembling. "You act like I ruined her." I supported her. I showed up. I loved her even when she shut me out. Her expression softened, not with sympathy, but something more unsettling, like pity. "That's why she stayed so long," she replied. Then she turned, opened the side door, and walked back into the building, leaving me there, with a throat full of silence and 100 new cracks forming inside my skull. I went back to my room in a daze. I didn't know what to feel anymore. I wasn't angry. Not like before. I felt erased. Like she'd been preparing for this removal not just for months, but for years. Not a sudden betrayal, but a slow burn. A strategic soft shuffle into freedom, where I was meant to slowly stop existing in her world without ever being told. Fallon wasn't having an affair. She was having an exit, and she had helped doing it. But I wasn't gone yet. And what I did next wasn't planned. It was instinct. I picked up her hoodie from the corner of the room, the one she wore the night of the party. Reached into the side pocket. Felt something solid. A hotel key card. Not for Crescent Bay. For another hotel. Different brand. Different city. And written on it, in her handwriting, was a name I'd never seen before. Lena. The next morning, I checked out without saying a word to anyone. Fallon thought I was passive, but I was done being part of her experiment. The drive to the other hotel took 4 hours. I didn't know what I expected to find when I got there. I didn't even know who Lena was. A fake name? A handler? Someone knew she'd become? All I knew was that Fallon had given herself a clean exit route, and it led here. The hotel was tucked away off the freeway in a quiet town surrounded by pines and that faint fog that makes you question if you're dreaming. I didn't check in. I just waited in the cafe across the street, nursing a black coffee I couldn't taste, watching the revolving doors like they were a stage curtain. Then, around 6:15 p.m., she appeared. Fallon, hair tied back, no makeup, jeans and a sweater that didn't belong to her usual wardrobe of control. She looked smaller, not physically, spiritually, like someone trying to fit inside a new skin and still unsure if it would hold. She sat alone at the far table by the window. She ordered tea. She stared at nothing. And I walked in. Her eyes widened as I approached. Not in fear, not in shock, but in recognition. The kind of look that said she thought I wouldn't come, but deep down, she knew I might. You weren't supposed to see any of this, she whispered when I sat down. I nodded. But I did. She didn't argue, didn't deny. She looked down at her hands, picked at a loose thread in her sleeve, then looked back up at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Guilt. Real. Human. Unpolished. I didn't cheat on you, Curtis, she said. Not with Silas. Not with Noah. Not physically. But I disappeared from us. On purpose. And I didn't know how to say that without shattering everything. I let the silence sit for a long time. I didn't need her to say more. I already knew. I'd seen the binder, heard the voice message, felt the absence growing like mold between us. But what I needed, what I deserved, wasn't closure from her. It was clarity for myself. You stopped loving me, I said finally. And instead of telling me, you studied how to leave without looking like the villain. She flinched, but didn't deny it. I didn't want to be cruel. But you were, I said calmly. And that's okay now, because I don't need your apology. Her eyes began to water, but I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel triumph either. I just felt peace. I followed you, I admitted. Watched you dance with a man while I stood invisible. Read words about me in someone else's handwriting. I came here expecting to find a stranger, but I didn't. She furrowed her brow, confused. I found me, Fallon. That landed. Because I meant it. I had spent so many years orbiting her fire that I forgot I had warmth of my own. My days were shaped around her needs, her chaos, her ambitions. I shrank myself, told myself that devotion meant sacrifice. But that's not love. That's erosion. I won't ask you to come back, I said gently. I don't even want you to. You're not mine anymore. And that's okay. She nodded slowly, lips trembling. I never hated you. I just forgot how to love you. I know, I said, standing up. She didn't stop me. She didn't beg. She just sat there, a woman who got everything she wanted, except peace. And I walked out of that cafe into the evening fog not as a victim, not as a shadow, but as a man reborn. I moved out of the city a few weeks later. Got a small place up north. Adopted a dog named Louie. Started hiking. Writing again. I even signed up to volunteer at the same library where Fallon once found me shelving poetry. Life is quiet now. And kind. And when I think of Fallon, I don't think of Mara or Silas or Noah. I think of the night I drove home from Crescent Bay. The night I said nothing. The night I left without rage. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away before they realize they needed you to stay.